Onions, Chapter 6, The Book Room. The bond issue for the Dome was creating more and more friction among the locals in Lausanne. Resistance to the costly project was hardening. It was a small but determined group. Sandrine Fuller had become the rallying point for these anti-domers, although she didn't know it yet. The movement was still nascent, but it was becoming more and more apparent that the mayor and his henchmen just might have a battle on their hands. But for now, this conflict was still hazy, unformed. It was early spring, a Saturday, and Sandrine was in her place outside City Hall, passing out flyers, answering questions, and letting anyone who would listen know about the history of the current administration. The mayor was trying to keep his past activities hidden, but before long, the seething current that was heating up under the surface would boil over and burst into the open. However, that was not happening on this day in April. Not yet. After several sessions in front of City Hall, CW had become good at haggling passers-by, grabbing their attention with a charming yet powerful vocal attack on corrupt City Hall politics and politicians. And today he was in great form. Hey, hey, hey! Listen up, folks! Read our flyers about the mayor and what's going on under cover of darkness. Yeah! That's darkness, D-A-R-K-N-E-S-S, stuff that's hidden, stuff he doesn't want anybody to know about. Well, we'll tell you about all of it. The sports dome is an albatross. That's a bird, ladies and germs, a big old vulture like Birdie that wants to suck up all your cash, all your income, and everything else he can get his talons on. Vote no on the sports dome. That's no on the sports dome. CW stopped this harangue and trotted over to Sandrine. I need more flyers, Mrs. Fuller. Did you hear me? Did you hear me? I'm getting pretty good. Pretty good, don't you think? Sandrine handed CW flyers and smiled and said, I like your passion, Charles. Keep it up. CW nodded and hurried back to his post several feet away. This was the routine. Every Saturday, CW showed up at Sandrine's bungalow and helped around the grounds. There was always something that needed attention, and he'd become a pretty good yard hand. He oiled the lawnmower, changed tires on the hot shot, washed dishes. CW had taken him to his tasks with gusto after the incident with the joint. He was beginning to actually feel joy in his work. Then there was the money. If he worked 8 hours, he earned $16 for one day's work. Out of every $2, he always squirreled away 50 cents and gave $1.50 to Mrs. Williams. His new income usually resulted in the purchase of more Black Cat comics, but some went for candy bars or soft drinks, or just savings. His new job was giving him a sense of freedom. One Saturday, while Sandrine was outside practicing on the trapeze, CW was taking a lunch break. He was in the kitchen eating chips and a bologna sandwich. Without thinking, he picked up the sandwich and wandered down the hall into the book room. CW stopped in the middle of the room and looked around. He'd been in libraries before, but he'd never seen so many books piled so high, so close together. He went to the wall where the ladder was resting, stooped down, and made a random selection. It was a book about submarines. As he leafed through the pages, it occurred to him that a book like this would be something a kid would be interested in, not a grown lady. Then he remembered that Mrs. Fuller had been collecting books since she was a little girl. Maybe she'd gotten it then. He opened the first page and checked the publishing date. It was 1978, 2 years ago. She'd bought the book recently. He checked some of the other books on the same row and found several on battleships, tank warfare, famous battles, airplanes of World War I, World War II, and a book on siege weapons of the 12th century. C.W. dropped to the floor and opened the book on ancient weapons. The first thing that caught his eye was a machine called a trebuchet, a large catapult that used a counterweight to throw heavy projectiles hundreds of yards into enemy fortifications. A German scientist had made a drawing of the machine. There was also a French depiction of one that was similar. "Fascinating stuff," Sandrine said. She'd entered silently and was standing over C.W.'s shoulder. One of the most important early inventions was the single stirrup. Without it, well, it was hard to turn around in the saddle without falling off. When the stirrup was invented, warriors had greater flexibility. The next and greatest invention was the crossbow. Nations tried to outlaw it because it was so accurate and gave soldiers the ability to kill at great distances. A good example took place at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, when French King William the Conqueror invaded England. A Norman archer shot an arrow from a crossbow that pierced the slit in the visor of English King Harold's helmet, killing him instantly and causing the English defeat. What about guns and stuff we have today? Gunpowder was invented by Chinese alchemists in the 9th century. It was made of sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter. They added liquid so it wouldn't explode so easily, then forced it through a screen and let it dry in the form of pellets. How do you remember all that stuff? Sandrine laughed. I don't. I forget half the information I read. But I read a lot, so I retain a lot. It's all proportional. Can I take this book on submarines with me? Sure. When you use the book room, it'll help you know what books are where. She pointed to the wall by the entrance from the hall. I call this Wall A. Wall A has fiction books like the Hardy Boys series, Lord of the Rings trilogy, and classic novels like Moby Dick, War and Peace, Jane Eyre, and Tom Sawyer. Wall B, where you got the submarine book, has history books, maps, books on forestry, warfare, the history of dueling. Wall C has famous people like Einstein, Dostoevsky, Norman Mailer, and James Thurber packed away. And on Wall D, you'll find a miscellaneous books, books of all kinds, anything you can imagine. Have you read all these books? Yep, at one time or another. I encourage you to read. The more you read, the more you know. The more you know, the more confident you'll become, and the harder it will be for people to take advantage of you. C.W. stared at Sandrine. What do you mean? Bring the book. She turned abruptly and walked out of the room. C.W. tucked the submarine warfare book under his arm and followed Sandrine into the kitchen, where she was already seated. He hopped into the opposite chair and took a bite of his sandwich. Bosco had jumped up on the table and eaten his chips, so he got another handful out of the bag. Let me explain something to you, Charles. Unenlightened, uninformed people usually haven't learned to discipline their minds, to learn to focus, store data in a manner they can recall when they need it. If you don't read a great variety of books, or you don't have an inquiring mind, you won't have any information stored up when you need it. You'll be a blank page walking around. If someone argues with you, and you don't have an arsenal of ideas to argue back with, you'll be putty in their hands. So, first, you have to read to gain knowledge. Then you have to learn to store the knowledge in a compartment of your brain so you can pull it out when you need it. And third, you need to organize your thoughts in order so you can present a logical, convincing argument. Then you won't need be anybody's fool. No one can take advantage of you if you have a plethora of information and use it to your defense. A what? A large amount. A plethora of something is a large amount of it. But how do you do that? Remember stuff you read. I store it away. Practice. Like everything else, practice and listening. If you really listen and absorb what's going on around you, things will make an impression on you, like light on a negative. Think of your mind as a film, and everything you see, you're taking a picture of it. Then file things away. Have a mental file for people, one for events, one for dates, one for important moral things like following the golden rule. Sandrine paused, studied C.W. You know the golden rule, don't you? C.W.'s face was blank. Something about a ruler? Have you heard of the Bible? Sure, everybody's heard of the Bible. The rule is, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Or, turnabout is fair play. Or, if you don't want a bloody nose, don't bloody the other guy's nose. Got it? Yeah. It helps to write things down. Carry a pad and pencil with you and note things you want to remember. Then check your notes before you go to bed at night. You'll be amazed how much you can recall if you write things down. Sandrine pulled out a book on Einstein. Your mind is a precious thing, C.W. You have a duty to fill it with great ideas, beautiful thoughts. Then you have to organize it, structure it, and most important, use it. Use it. You can be a bum or a great man. You can be a murderer or a healer. You can be a drunk or walk on the moon. Your choice. I have to finish my workout. Sandrine started out, but paused at the kitchen door. I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. If you read a book a week, I'll give you another $5 a month. End of every month? That's a lot more comic books. How do you know I read comics? You had one on the grass when I smacked the joint out of your hand. How about it? Deal? A book a week. You can do it. Make up your mind. Concentrate. C.W. thought a moment. $5 more was a whole lot. And a lot more of Felicia Hardy. Okay, deal. Good. You can start with a book on submarines. And later, you can tell me about Felicia.